So in a previous video we looked at how to give a character telekinetic abilities. Basically they could cause an object to levitate and then they could throw it like a projectile as a weapon. In this case we want to give you the ability to detonate objects remotely. So there's a couple parts to this. Let's first put in what's already been created externally. So we have 4 images down here. 3 of them are going to be directly put into the scene. The last one will not. You'll see what we'll do with that in a minute. So let's start with our barrel. Just drag and drop it. And for whatever reason, it's looking kind of big. So let's just shrink that down a bit. So pixels per unit, if you make the number bigger, the object gets small. And the reason for that is because it's a ratio. Now we'll put in the board, and this needs to be scaled and rotated. Now let's both give them collider boxes. So on the board, let's go add component, physics 2D, box collider, and we're done with that. Don't have to do anything else with it. For the barrel, let's go to add component, physics 2D, and we'll do polygon collider 2D. So basically it shapes the foreground and it ignores the alpha channel space, whatever color is set to the alpha channel. Let's go ahead and put in our playable character. Let's see, we'll also give her physics 2D, polygon collider 2D. So again, it's form-fitting. Now let's go ahead and create our pyrotechnics that we're going to use. So let's go to game object and we'll do particle system, and this will be called glow, because what's going to happen is there'll be 2 steps. One, when you start to charge your pyrotechnic ability, whatever object is your target will start to heat up. So we want to give some kind of indication of that. You could just give it like a reddish color, but might as well use the particle systems since we've got them, and it's something that you don't typically see particle systems used for. You can, but very often you see it used for smoke or explosions. It can also be used for auras. So let's take this particle system, rotate it towards the screen. Let's go down to shape, change it to a circle. Let's shrink the radius. Oops. Now, what makes auras different than a lot of particle systems is the fact that it's so slow moving. You have to have the particles move very slowly so you don't really differentiate the individual particles. So start speed, bring that all the way down to 1, still too fast. Bring it down to 0.3, still too fast. 0.1. Actually, pretty close to 0 is what we want. We'll just line up with the barrel because that's going to be the target. So let's try start speed of 0.01, 5, 8. Okay, so that's getting close. Now, a couple things. A, we have to increase the emission because it's way too low. Second, we don't want the edge to just disappear like that, so we have to change the size over time. Click on that, and now you have the graph here, so you can change the size over time. Go ahead and do that because we really want it to change at the very last. We'll now make the start color, let's make it red since it's a pyrotechnic ability. Okay, so it's starting to get there. Let's go back into there and see how the alpha channel looks if we reduce that so it's transparent. Alright, that's kind of getting to where I want, because now you don't really have a sense of particles, you just kind of have this sense of this kind of nebulous glow. Oh, sorry, go to bring it to the front. So, under renderer, we want it to be on top of everything else. So ordering layer, just pop it up to 5. Everything else is going to be layer like 0 or 1. Oh. Sorry about that. It's way far on the Z axis. Now, usually Z is ignored, but if you can see, right here is the camera. It was actually past the camera. So, relatively speaking, Z isn't important, but as an absolute, it has to be in front of the camera. So, sorry that that happened. There we go. So, probably could be a little bit more transparent. And let's also see if we can change the size over time. Not the size over time, we would change size over time. Let's see if we change transparency over time, because right now it starts off as a certain amount. So color over lifetime, we're not going to change the color, just going to change transparency. Just kind of randomly choosing numbers to see how that looks. Okay, that's definitely more transparent now. I think we'll keep that. Again, this isn't the final graphic you're going to use, so as long as you get the idea of how to create a glow, an aura. So now, since that has to be instantiated, we're going to take that and drag and drop that into our asset area, making it asset, and we'll delete it from there. Now, the second thing we need, so we've got our glow, now we need a burst. So game object, particle system, call this one burst. Let's rotate this one first. Let's change the shape first. I think that's why it created a problem, was because I rotated it first. So let's change that to circle, and then we'll rotate it. Now this one is going to be a little bit different because we're going to actually apply a new material to it. That way it'll have more of a fiery appearance to it because those circles just aren't cutting it. So to do that, it's a two-step process. First you have to create a material. You apply your image that you're going to use for the particle to the material, and then you apply the material to the particle system, because if you come down here, you go to renderer, you'll see right here, see, it has a material. The material is the default particle, and that circle is the default particle. So like I said, it's kind of a multi-step approach. You create the material, and then you apply it. So we'll do create material. We'll call this fire mat. For fire mat, first, let's change this because I think I have this in a couple places in this project. So we'll call this flame small, and we click on flame mat, and you have the ability to select the particle. So just go down to where your item is, do flame small. So that's the first step. You've created your mat with the image that you want to use. Now you have to apply it to your particle system. So you take it and you drag and drop and you replace that one. Now it looks terrible because we haven't chosen the right shader yet. So go back to our fire mat, and we need to change the shader. And there's so many different ones. Getting the right one. Okay, so now let's have first, we don't want it to last nearly as long, so start lifetime, let's bring that down to 1 second, and that's still way too long. So let's bring it down to 0.5. Now the size is too big, so what you do is you'll shrink the size of the image itself. As it turns out, I'd actually made it bigger to begin with, so maybe I should have left it where it was. Okay, so the rest we can just shrink with the start size here. So let's bring that down to 0.4. Let's increase the emission. And like I've said before, it's really like sculpting when you start getting into this. Okay, that's getting us somewhere. Let's go to start color. Start it off as yellow. And we'll go to color over lifetime. The bottom is color, the top is transparency. So we won't mess with transparency yet. Okay, so it's getting a little more fiery looking. But we kind of want it to be a burst. So what we want it to do is we want the lifetime to be very short and the start speed to be very, the start lifetime to be very short as well. So let's get rid of looping, zoom in a bit, and see how that looks. Okay, circle's too big, so let's shrink that in so it emanates from a much smaller point. Now let's compare it to this. Okay, now the start size is still a little bit too big, so let's go ahead and drop that down to 0.3. And now we're going to make them rotate, because right now they just come out straight in every direction and it's very obvious that it's this kind of S-looking shape. Let's make them, so rotation over lifetime, let's change this to 180. So it does a half circle. And we'll also do size of a lifetime. Let's have them shrink. And let's see how those two things. See, now it's not so static. You might not be able to point it out, but your brain really registers the fact that there's more motion going on. So let's color over lifetime. Now let's change transparency. But we don't want to get transparent the whole time. So what you do is create another point here. Put it back up to the full amount. So since this one is 255 and this key point is 255, there's no change. The change doesn't start until after here. See how that looks now. Let's check to see if that's in the right place. See, again, I'm not sure why this is happening, but for some reason things are coming out way out into the Z-axis. So I probably have a default setting off to fix. And again, Z is usually ignored except as an absolute amount, because if it's too far out, then it's beyond the camera. And the other thing that we want to do is we also need to change order and layer again, because we changed it for the other one. So now, let's see how that looks. Okay, so it's not dense enough yet, I don't think. And at a certain point, I might just jump ahead, because now I've hit all the major points. Now it's just tweaking it. Okay, I think that's about as good as we're going to get this time. So, doesn't look as good as I'd hoped, but again, this is just the broad strokes. Alright, so now that we have the burst, we'll drag and drop that down to the asset area, delete it from the scene. So now what we need to do is now we need to make the glow instantiate with one click, and then check for time and have the second particle system instantiate. So basically you have these cascading particle systems, for want of a better term, where one triggers the other. And the other thing to keep in mind is that for gameplay balance, you might want to have your character not be mobile. I haven't put in any kind of movement controls, so you might want to have some kind of indicator that they're trying to do this, and either one of two things happens. Either they can't move while they're charging, or two, if they do move, it breaks the charge. Unless you want them to just be able to detonate things as they're moving. Again, that's purely game balance, and that's up to what the goals you're trying to achieve with your application. So what we want to do then is we want to create C# script, and we'll just call this Firestarter. We'll take our barrel and we'll put the Firestarter script onto it. Gonna do a couple things. Let's zoom in so it's easier for you to read. So public transform fire glow, public transform fire burst. That is going to be obviously for the two particle systems, because the barrel needs to be aware of them to make this happen. So we go to the barrel, there's the two, put burst on burst, and glow on glow. Now what we need to do is we need the barrel to be able to be clickable. You're going to click the mouse on it to initiate the pyrotechnics. So what we need to do then is the barrel needs to be a trigger. So we added a polygon collider earlier. Now we're just going to click on is trigger. Now we go back to the script, and outside of start, outside of update, you're going to do void on mouse down and we'll just do debug.log. I strongly suggest that whenever you add new functionality, if you have to detect something, test the detection first to make sure the detection is working, because it's so easy to get this wrong. One wrong letter, it is case sensitive. So you miss a letter, make something capital that shouldn't be, or vice versa, and it won't work. So always test that detection before you get deep into coding. So I'm going to click on it, and it says success. So we know it's working. I didn't make any typos. Okay, so we can get rid of that now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate this is the glow first, so fire glow. Where is it going to instantiate? So 3 arguments: where it's what is going to be instantiated, where it's going to be instantiated, and its rotation. So where is going to be at the current position of the barrel. Since this script is attached to the barrel, you just have to do transform.position, and then for the rotation it should be fireglow.rotation. You want to use its rotation that we designated when we created it. So let's run that. Perfect. Now, it automatically glows red, so depending on what you're trying to do, you may want it to... I think that's pre-warmed already, so you might want to get rid of the pre-warm. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that looks much more natural. So in this case, you don't want the pre-warm, you actually want it to build up. Okay, so that's a good start. Now you want to track how long it's been warming up and whatever amount of time you want it to be, half a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever amount of time, and then the other one will be instantiated, the other particle system will be instantiated. So we're going to add a new variable to track that. So public float, so we're going to be using decimals, and we'll do call this heat timer, and we'll set it to 0. Now, we want the heat timer to begin in here, but you don't have to keep clicking on it. So what we need to do is we need to, in the update section, probably just add another variable, make this simpler. So public float, and this one will just be a string actually. So public string start timer equals no. And then what we'll do in here, when you click mouse down, so when you click on the object, start timer will simply be set to yes. Okay. So what that lets us do is now we can check to see if start timer is set to yes. So if start timer equals yes, or y rather, but you know. So start timer equals y. Let's see if we can just do heat timer plus equals time dot delta time. If, and yes, embedded in the other if statement, nested in it. So if heat timer is greater than 2, debug .log. Basically, I'm checking to make sure that this isn't queuing up many different frames. That it will only increase this by 1 frame's worth of past time. Okay, good. Excellent. So we can get rid of that. In here, we can do instantiate. This time we'll go to instantiate fire burst, comma, transform, oops, want the lower t, transform dot position fire burst dot rotation. Okay, so a couple things. First, we want this to only happen once. We want it to be instantiated once, and since this is embedded, or again nested in this, we just have to change that back to 0. So start timer. I said 0, I meant no, sorry. I'm sorry, it's only one equal sign. You only use 2 if it's an if statement. When you're actually changing the value, it's one if sign, one equal sign.